A Texas family just got robbed at knife point in broad daylight in San Francisco. And 2 weeks later, they're planning their next vacation to New Zealand, calling it the safest place on Earth. But are they right? Because what I'm about to show you will completely change how you think about safety in both countries. And the answer isn't what you expect. Real quick, if you want the unfiltered truth about traveling to New Zealand versus staying in the USA, hit subscribe right now. I'm channel name, and I dig into the data and stories that tourism boards and news media won't show you. Now, back to this safety debate that's dividing travelers. Here's why this matters in 2025. In 2019, both the USA and New Zealand felt relatively safe for travelers. Sure, America had higher crime rates, but it wasn't dominating every conversation. By 2023, something shifted. Mass shootings made headlines. Retail theft exploded. Carjackings became a daily news story in major U.S. cities. And in 2025, the perception gap between these two countries has never been wider. According to the UN Office on Drugs and Crime's 2024 global study, the United States has a homicide rate of 6.3 per 100,000 people. New Zealand? Just 0.7 per 100,000. That's 9 times lower. But here's the thing. That stat is driving a massive wave of Americans to book flights to New Zealand, thinking they've found paradise. And some of them are in for a rude awakening. Let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah's a 34-year-old marketing manager from Portland, Oregon. She's got 2 kids, ages 6 and 8, and like a lot of parents, her number one priority when planning a vacation is safety. Walking to her car that Tuesday morning in March 2025, broken glass crunching under her feet for the 3rd time that month, Sarah knew something had to change. 3 car break-ins in 1 month. In her own driveway, her neighbor's Ring camera caught someone casing their street at 3 a.m. The local Facebook group was filled with similar stories. Police response time? Over an hour for a non-emergency property crime. So Sarah started researching. And everywhere she looked, New Zealand kept coming up. Safest country in the world. Perfect for families. 0 gun violence. She felt that familiar feeling. Relief mixed with hope. Maybe there's still a place where her kids could just be kids, without her constantly looking over her shoulder. She booked 2 weeks in New Zealand for December 2025, $4,000 for flights, another $3,000 for accommodation and car rental. But 3 weeks before departure, Sarah stumbled across a Reddit thread that made her heart sink. Hold on, because what she discovered completely changed her understanding of safety. See, when we talk about safety, most people only think about violent crime. Murder, assault, robbery. And yeah, by those metrics, New Zealand absolutely destroys the United States. The 2024 comparative analysis from the Institute for Economics and Peace shows that the U.S. has a violent crime rate 74% higher than New Zealand. The U.S. had 656 mass shootings in 2023. New Zealand had 0. American kids do active shooter drills in school. Kiwi kids don't. This data is driving a massive wave of what I call safety tourism. Americans fleeing high-crime areas for vacation destinations they perceive as havens. Tourism New Zealand's 2024 report showed a 23% increase in American visitors compared to 2019. And when surveyed, 67% cited safety and low crime as a primary factor in choosing New Zealand. Makes sense, right? But here's what Tourism New Zealand's glossy brochures don't tell you. New Zealand has a dirty little secret that most tourists don't discover until it's too late. Meet James. He's a 28-year-old Australian who decided to spend 3 months backpacking around New Zealand in early 2024. James had heard all the safety hype. He'd been to Southeast Asia, Europe, even traveled through parts of South America. He considered himself a savvy traveler. His 3rd week in New Zealand, James parked his rental car at a trailhead near Queenstown. Beautiful area. Middle of the day. Other cars around. Felt perfectly safe. 4-hour hike. Absolutely stunning. One of the best days of his trip. He got back to his car, and his passenger window was smashed. Laptop gone. Camera gear worth $2,000 gone. Passport, backup credit cards, Even his spare shoes from the back seat. All gone. At the police station, the officer barely looked up. Trail car break-ins? Yeah, we get about 5 reports a week just from this area. 5 a week. James asked why there weren't warning signs. Why nothing was being done. The officer shrugged. We put up signs. People leave valuables anyway. We don't have the resources to patrol every trailhead. So I started digging into the data, and what I found was shocking. According to Stats NZ's 2023 crime statistics, New Zealand's burglary rate is 821 per 100,000 people. The United States? 269 per 100,000. New Zealand has a burglary rate 3 times higher than the United States. But wait, it gets worse for tourists specifically. A 2024 investigation by the New Zealand Herald found that tourist-targeted theft, specifically rental car break-ins at tourist destinations, increased 34% between 2022 and 2024. Rental cars are targeted because they're obvious. They have rental company stickers or unique plates. They're parked at predictable locations. And tourists tend to leave valuables inside because they feel safe. Here's why this is happening. New Zealand has a tiny population spread across an area the size of Colorado. They have about 14,000 total police officers for 5.1 million people. Compare that to Texas, which has 77,000 law enforcement officers for 30 million people. Similar ratio, but Texas has actual presence in populated areas. In New Zealand, police response times in rural areas, where most tourist attractions are, can exceed 2 hours, sometimes longer. Criminals know this. Tourists don't. Now here's where it gets really interesting, because the data shows something nobody's talking about in the safety debate. Safety isn't just about crime. So let's get practical. If you're trying to decide between traveling in the USA or New Zealand in 2025, here's exactly what you need to know. If you're choosing the USA, first, avoid these cities with the highest violent crime rates according to 2024 FBI data. St. Louis, Baltimore, Detroit, Memphis, and Little Rock. These 5 cities alone account for disproportionate violent crime statistics. But here's the thing. The vast majority of America is statistically quite safe. You're looking at specific urban corridors and neighborhoods driving the national numbers. Want safe USA travel? National parks, small towns, suburban areas, statistically very safe. If you're choosing New Zealand, never, and I mean never, leave anything visible in your rental car. Not a jacket, not a backpack, not even loose change. Take everything with you or lock it in the trunk before you arrive at your destination. Thieves watch parking lots. Here's a money-saving tip. Travel insurance for New Zealand costs about 40% less than U.S. travel insurance, because insurance companies know you're statistically less likely to be seriously injured or killed. That's a real metric. Insurance companies literally bet on this data. But here's an insider tip tourism sites won't tell you. Police response times in rural New Zealand, where most tourist attractions are, average 90 to 120 minutes. Some areas can be 3 hours or more. If something happens, you're largely on your own until help arrives. Download the Safe Travel app before you go to either country. It's free, and it gives you real-time safety alerts, emergency contacts, and updated crime statistics for specific areas. But here's what nobody talks about when comparing safety between these countries. Safety isn't just about crime statistics. Let's talk about what happens if you actually get hurt. In the United States, even with travel insurance, medical care can financially ruin you. A broken leg requiring surgery? $30,000 to $70,000. Heart attack? Over $100,000. New Zealand has a system called ACC, Accident Compensation Corporation. If you're injured in New Zealand, even as a tourist, your immediate medical care is covered. No lawsuits, no insurance battles. You just get treated. But here's a plot twist. New Zealand actually has a higher road death rate per capita than the United States. 8.4 road deaths per 100,000 people in New Zealand versus 7.3 in the USA, according to 2023 OECD data. Why? Narrow, winding rural roads. International tourists unfamiliar with left-side driving. Limited shoulders. And those same long emergency response times we talked about. And we haven't even mentioned natural disasters. New Zealand sits on a major fault line. Wellington, the capital, is considered one of the most earthquake-prone cities in the developed world. The U.S. has hurricanes, tornadoes, and wildfires, but they're regionally predictable. Here's what I found when I followed the money. The U.S. travel insurance industry generates over $2.7 billion annually. A huge chunk of that is driven by fear marketing around international travel being dangerous. They profit when Americans are scared to leave the country. But they also profit when Americans are scared to travel domestically. If current trends continue, and every projection I've seen suggests they will, by 2027, the violent crime gap between the U.S. and New Zealand will widen even further. But the property crime gap? That might shrink as New Zealand finally invests in rural policing. So here's my question for you. Would you rather visit a country where you're statistically much safer from violence and murder, but significantly more likely to have your car broken into and belongings stolen? Or would you take your chances with higher violent crime rates, but better property security and faster police response? There's no objectively right answer here. It depends on your personal risk tolerance, where specifically you're going, and what kind of safety matters most to you. But I want your honest take in the comments below. Tell me, are you booking New Zealand? Staying in the USA? What does this data make you want to go somewhere completely different? The most thoughtful answer, the one that really digs into the nuance here, gets featured in next week's video. Because next week, I'm exposing why Americans are getting rejected from New Zealand at record rates. I got my hands on leaked immigration assessment documents, and the real reasons they're turning people away have nothing to do with what officials are saying publicly. I'm Travruth. If you want the unfiltered truth about New Zealand travel and immigration that tourism ads and government websites won't show you, subscribe right now. See you next week.